to the degree that you can go deep into those really seemingly negative or icky emotions, anger, grief, sadness, to the depth that you can go into those in your nervous system, the same as the opposite is true with pleasure and joy and happiness.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Doc Jacque Show. I have somebody with me today. Her name is Dr. Tiffany Graham, and she is a health facilitator and has been a health facilitator for a while. And was it been like 5 or 6 years that we've kind of known each other? It's been a while.
I think like 2016, 17, something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and this has been, in my opinion, it's been a long time coming. Like we were talking about before we hit the record button, I've kind of seen the growth that you've gone through, but I want to take a minute and have you kind of introduce yourself. Who are you? Where did you come from? And how the hell did you get into this?
So, man, natural health has always been a part of my life. I grew up getting adjusted since I was 5 years old. We always had healthy food in the house. It was always just a part of how we lived life. And I was also an athlete. So I used chiropractic as an athlete to stay in the game. If I got injured, that's what I used. So that was definitely an easy avenue when I decided in college. I actually came from kind of a dark place. I decided in college that I was never going to depend on a man for any type of support ever. and I made a vow that I would become a doctor. And so I still remember that turning point when I decided to go for higher education and to be more independent and really step into that part of me. And then I had no idea what I was in store for when I stepped into chiropractic school and learned just the power of the body to heal. I got turned on to that. I just thought it was a good way to help prevent pain and help people with pain. And I had no idea about the nervous system. And once I started really understanding the power of our body to heal and the nervous system specifically, gosh, it turned me on in a way that I had not felt before, other than volleyball. It was really interesting. Yeah. So volleyball has been a huge part of my life. And I started skipping tournaments. I would play volleyball tournaments every weekend. I would start skipping that to go talk to people about chiropractic and health and that their body can heal. So I know when something gets turned on in me, I go pretty deep, and that's what happens. So that's what started this whole thing.
Yeah. And it comes from my understanding too, from just knowing you and kind of what you said, it's just that deep yearning and that deep passion to be able to help people better themselves. And you've acquired a lot of tools along the way. And I remember there's an audio that I used to listen to all the time from Reggie Gold, Dr. Reggie Gold.
Yeah.
And he referred to chiropractic like buying a blender. And at first you only use it to smash ice because that's all you really know it's used for. And then all of a sudden you start opening up after like 6 months, you open up the instruction manual. You're like, holy cow, like this, I can do this. And then I can do this. I can make soups. I can make cookie dough. I can make pizza dough, like
salsa and all the things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it came from that one piece. And then you've been able to expand upon that and be able to allow other utilities, modalities is what I was going to be able to dive into that. So let's dive into that. So what are you currently doing? What's your current passion with right now? Because I have a little bit of an idea.
So my biggest passion right now is somatic healing. It has changed, and it's something that's changed my life. You know, I love chiropractic, and I believe that chiropractic prevented so much from happening in my life. I'm one of those people where chiropractic didn't save my life. I didn't have headaches growing up, and then all of a sudden, chiropractic saved me, right? Or I didn't have like massive allergies, and chiropractic saved me. I didn't have any of that. I just never had to go through that, and I wanted other people to experience that level of health, right? But then with somatic healing, though, on the emotional side, how emotions are manifest into physical symptoms through the body. And as you release those emotions through the body, because the body is ultimately intelligent, and that's also a principle of chiropractic. And with the 3 T's that I teach all of my patients, the third T is thoughts. So emotional trauma. And I've been calling them the 3 traumas, not like trauma, toxins, and thoughts. I've been calling them the 3 traumas. So physical trauma, chemical trauma, emotional trauma. And as I started seeing how I was working with my body and really getting into touch with the emotional healing. Everything in my life started shifting. My relationships, my relationship with my daughter, how I showed up as a mother. I'm a working mother. I was a single mother for years. Now I have a wonderful partner and he has 3 children. So we have a happy little family part-time.
It's awesome.
So that's been wonderful. But I've been able to call that in because of the personal growth that I've experienced and how I've really broken, I believe, generational curses, generational traumas, and also been able to really step into healing. And then you cannot you can't lead patients where you haven't gone. I think it's really, or more difficult. So being willing to go there personally has really, I can show up as a better health facilitator.
Yeah, because when you've been through the suck of it, you know, and you've done the work, it makes you that much more passionate about it. And it's not even about like just explaining it, you know, like we're doctors, we're good at explaining random facts if we need to, but when we experience those facts, we don't even really need to bring the facts to the table. We're just like, hey, this is what you need to do. And this is why. And they're like, oh, okay, perfect. Whatever you say, doc. And
your certainty.
Yeah. That trust factor is increased. Now, I know what somatic healing and stuff is, but I want you to try to water it down and be like, well, what is to the people that don't know it? Like, what is somatic healing? What does that look like for people?
Great question. So soma means the body. And somatic means working within the body, outside of the mind. Thoughts are the language of the mind, and then emotions are the language of the body. And when we have emotions that we don't let be fully expressed in our nervous system, or even as kids, we don't know how to fully express things or understand what's happening, or when our parents split up or something traumatic happens to us, our body does an amazing thing because our body does the right thing all the time, right? Our body does an amazing thing and it stores that somewhere for protection because you can't process it. You're not able to, for whatever reason, move it through your nervous system. So it stores it in different parts of the body. So somatic healing is going into the body. So physically, I kind of explain to my patients, like, it's like a massage. You lay on a massage table and we go into areas that are more tender and actually I've had somatic work also through talk therapy too. So you can do this through talking without having somebody touch you. You can do it over Zoom even, like, and do self work. So I love that as well. With COVID helped us like learn all of those things. Yeah. But we go into either a trigger point or a tender area and we stay in the body with usually sounding breath is the way I like to do it. Because when you breathe, like, and you stay in your body and then you create loving space where whatever emotions, thoughts, feelings, energy, you don't have to understand it. That's the cool thing about the body is the body just knows what to do. It can come out, be released, and you can move on.
That's can be difficult at times too. So like you said,
there can be screaming, there can be crying, there can be, absolutely.
Well, we all have the egoic center that we have, our ego, right? And so a lot of this and a lot of these healing practices revolve around, in my opinion, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but around the surrender and just surrendering to your body and trusting your body knows better than your conscious brain. Right? Because consciously, our bodies are designed to heal us. It's designed to give us symptoms, whether we like it or not. It's designed to keep us alive. And when we store and we stash these things in our body, I've had crazy stories with patients where I don't do the release myself. I'll send it like somebody like you. And I had a patient last week or 2 weeks ago, and she had this balled up knot in her stomach. We were doing some stomach healing. She had some infections and stuff in the gut. And she went to this Reiki, a Reiki professional master, and they were around her stomach. And without knowing anything, they're like, you've got a little energy block here. We need to release this. And they released it. And within the hour, like her stomach unknotted, everything went good. Digestion went back to normal. And then we've been able to kind of peel back the layers of like, what caused that to begin with? You know, you release the energy, but let's make sure that you don't attract that energy again. And for me, I'll talk about, and this isn't factual per se, but I'll pretend like each time you have a trauma, you have it in a certain shape. in the body. So I'll just use it because we've got kids. Like it's like a circle. You got a circle poked out of your body. And if you don't change that circle represents every single negative thing about what needed to be released. If you don't change that circle into a different shape, like a square, or you fill it in with your own self-worth, then you still have that hole. And magnetically, we're going to bring something back to fill that void again, whether it's this month, next month, or next year. That can gravitate right back towards you. So that's some of the stuff that I've experienced in practice, and I've seen that. Like, what are
that's
some?
Why,
of the, yeah,
that's why integration is so important.
Yeah.
One of my first biggest experiences was going down to Costa Rica and experiencing ayahuasca. And one of my biggest aha moments, I died and was reborn, and that's a whole other podcast. But integration of that can take years. It doesn't just happen overnight. And so that's the filling it up. So something doesn't just come back in. And that's where you see people get addicted to these healing modalities, or they get addicted to seeing psychics or mediums or going to Reiki practitioners, or they feel like they need something outside of themselves to be whole. And that is not true. And I believe that integration and filling that up has been one of, if not more powerful, but just as powerful as the work itself.
Yeah. 1,000% agree with that. So one of the things we wanted to talk about here too, with kind of going into this as well. So we've been able to do, and you've been able to do, like the chiropractic work. And I believe that a strong reason as to why you never experienced the headaches and the asthma and all that stuff is because you were healthy. You were raised healthy since birth. And so you already had that foundation and the experience to say, hey, parents, you've got kids, make sure you start these guys young, teach them how to eat properly, teach them to get adjusted. I
wasn't vaccinated.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I got to kick you off the podcast. No. but really, teach them the proper ways of what true health actually is. And then you've been able to go through, and the cool thing is, because you've played volleyball, and I knew that about you, is you have a certain coachability about you where you're adaptive, where if you find something better or you find something that can help, you're going to bring that in because you're constantly trying to evolve and be better yourself. And so if it's better for you, then it's going to be better for the people that you work with. And I'm a strong believer of we work with the people that are most like us or need us the most. So how have you been able to go and be, for a time, a single mom, go through business, and now you've kind of evolved into where you are right now? I know we talked about the old school way of thinking to the new school way of thinking. Why don't you fill us in on where you were, what your beliefs were, and then where you are right now, especially with business?
So being coachable it's like two sides of a coin, right? So being coachable has so much advantages, and I have a really strong masculine energy. And so I can go into almost like a man's world, I guess you could say. I can go into these systematic compartmentalizing energies. And I was really attracted to a coaching group right out of chiropractic school that will not be named. That was really toxic and very manipulative and controlling, and really misogynistic at times, sexist, all of those things. But I can play in that space. I can move around that space because I do have a lot of that masculine energy. So I pulled that out. It was really toxic.
Yeah.
So I was one of their franchises.
Yeah.
The first month of business, I had to pay them $14,000. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. because of the agreement that I had to pay them all this money because they did all this training with me, which it's really valuable. It's made me who I am. So I'm not cursing that at all.
Yeah.
But I basically did it 2 years of being a residency, I guess you could say, but being somebody's bitch, and learning just how do you talk to people? And really manipulative tactics of how to sell, how to inspire, and now I believe I was coming from a place of, I know people need this message, right? And it's just the old way of doing things. And then, so I didn't see that as sustainable as soon as I became a mother. So as soon as I became a mother, I definitely started stepping into more of feminine energy. And of course, you have to. My daughter didn't take a bottle. She was literally, I was nursing in between patients. She was in my office. I only took 5 weeks off, and I felt guilty about taking time off after, having a freaking baby. So all of that. And then one of my best friends died, who was in that group. And I saw really the reality, and he was really successful. They touted that he was super successful. They put him up on the pedestal, and I put him up on a pedestal, but he wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And he couldn't have personal relationships. He couldn't have healthy relationships. And then I saw multiple other doctors get cancer. And I knew that, or destroy their lives. I knew that it just wasn't sustainable. And I'm like, okay, we got to figure out something different. So then I went into and did the medical model integrations, like integrative medicine. So we brought on a medical doctor overseeing like medical director, and we brought on like a PA, nurse practitioner. And that helped a lot, but it was still lots of systems and lots of using insurance, and it still was like, and I like a little bit of, if we can like use the insurance for people's benefits, it's great. Sure. But it never really clicked. It never really like popped off, and I never knew why. I always beat myself up. Like, I'm bad. I'm wrong. I'm not strong enough. I'm not good enough, until just recently, honestly. So that's been since 2016. So we're talking 6 years of beating my head against a wall. And the more that I grew personally and stepped into feminine energy, sexual energy, creative energy, the old paradigm of extraction, like extracting and manipulating things around with people, your patients, your employees, it just didn't work. It just wasn't going to work. And so I'm like, throw this all out the window, and I'm going to start trusting my own wisdom of how are we going to do things. So I know that was really long, but that's been the arc of the story.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it wasn't long. That was very short.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what we were saying. Like I've seen a lot of that since, again, I guess it was 2016 when we first met at a seminar that we were in. And seeing the transition of where you were and what you were going through, I'm like, like she's like, I could see, I'm like, she's going through something. Like, this is really cool. And it was really awesome to kind of watch. And I appreciate you. And I know my wife, Megan, appreciate you kind of sharing your journey along the way, because it allowed for other people to also wake up. And like, well, wait a second. Like, Dr. Tiffany, she's super freaking powerful, but now she's doing this. Like, at first people might be like, what is that? Like, that's weird. But then they're like, but no, like, you can see, like, again, since 2016 till now, like, your light is brighter. So what you've been doing has been cranking up your energy, whether it's masculine or feminine, your energy is brighter, which is then going to attract more people, which is also going to allow you to heal more people because you're stronger, you're more powerful. So that's what I see on my end.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. It is unfortunate that that's kind of the way that a lot of these organizations are. It's just like, just get after it until you fall apart. And we just become a cog in a wheel. And it's just about making, somebody else a bunch more money. And again, like you can get training and stuff and we can take things away from it. But
it's like this disgusting MLM, like multi-level marketing. And I've seen it in even like the spiritual coaching world now. It's really interesting. I was able to like call it out.
Yeah.
And see it and confront it much more quickly than I ever would have because of my experiences in the past.
Yeah. And instead of having your face shoved down in failure and what you're not doing right, you're sitting above. And so you have that bird's eye view of what you're actually doing and what you're creating. And I mean, I've seen the same thing in that same organization. Yeah. I know people who did become incredibly sick, and I've seen people get cancer. And then the other organizations, same thing, just like, go until you're broke or you're dead. And then I'm just going to replace you with somebody else that's going to do the same thing. And if you even have 1 month of dipping, then I'm going to threaten to replace you with somebody else. Like, I've had so many docs come to me and they say this stuff. I'm like, how do you live? And again, like when we're talking about the 3 T's there and we're talking about thoughts, and you're instilling such fearful thoughts. And to me, like cancers in particular, a lot of cancers are cancers of the nervous system, whether it's a parasympathetic or sympathetic dominant style cancer. And if we have this state of dis-ease or discord in the body, then our body's not resonating at the proper frequencies. And what's happening is time and time and time again, we're sitting with that, and then we're waking up with anxiety. We're waking up with depression. We start losing our bowels because we're in such a sympathetic state. We're so fearful. And then we hit the poverty mindset, which just, I mean, once you hit that poverty mindset, if you stay there, that's all you're going to bring to you. It's just misery, lack of success, and just more desperation. And nobody makes good decisions or proper decisions when they're in that fight or flight state.
Absolutely. I remember I was told once that me having a boyfriend, the first organization, I've been part of 2 that have been really toxic, but and you know which ones, but I remember my coach sat me down and told me that me having a boyfriend within my first like few months of practice was the same thing as this other doctor he was working with that was watching porn every night for 4 hours. That like I was that distracted, and that the reason why I wasn't succeeding like they wanted me to, because they kept telling me, oh, you're gonna be 1,000 a week, like woman, blah, blah, right? Which I mean, I'm glad they instilled some self-confidence, but then I had to take it for myself. I couldn't get it from an outside source.
Sure.
But yeah, I remember, and they're like, you need to go to counseling. So I went to counseling, and in counseling was when I realized how like full of shit they were.
Oh my God. I didn't know that part. That's
man. The shit that I've been through with like the way that they treat women in that kind of energy, the way that women were treated in both of those organizations.
Yeah.
I mean, it needs to change. I'm not mad about it, because that means more women are just going to stand up and be like, no, this is how we're going to do it. So I'm not completely mad about it, but it taught me a lot.
Yeah. And that's the blessing in it too, is it taught you a lot, and it taught you how to move through that. And that's what we've kind of seen too, is a little bit more of like an eruption where like it's in your face. And Tony Robbins talks about the pain pleasure principle. And when something is painful enough, eventually you're going to move. So whether that's move out of the office or move out of the organization, or just start to get things for yourself. And I think what's awesome is like what you're doing is you kind of, in a way, and I don't know if you thought of this or not, but you have a bridge built between the old to the new. Because you've been there, you've done the work, which means you've constructed the bridge to get to the other side. And a lot of people don't move because they're fearful, and fear is a very strong motivating factor to stay put. People don't like to be uncomfortable, but if they know that you've been through it, they see you on the other side, like, oh shit, like kind of want to be like that. So what does she do? And then you can lead them over the bridge, and then boom, welcome to the other side. This is where you have peace. This is where you have harmony. This is where you have a great first night's sleep for the first time in 10, 15 years. And your relationships are better, like way better.
I love that idea, by the way. I love that idea. The bridge. That was so good. I just want to appreciate you for that kind of insight.
Yeah. And again, because when we're down in it, even though, you're still in a bird's eye view, I'm just a third party perspective. So I see things a little bit differently than you do because you're in it. But yeah, I mean, that's how I see you and what you're doing. And it's such a much needed set of modalities. Like your skill set is profound, because not many people know what the heck they're doing. They'll tout that they know what they're doing, which is like the social media influencer world, which drives me fucking nuts when I see stuff posted online. And I'm like, you're doing what now? And what? And you have no. And then I'll like meet with them, and I'm like, they're just not what you say you are at all. And it drives me crazy. So I try to pride myself on bringing people on the podcast that are authentic, because there's nothing that I want more than to raise up the authentic people, because we know what inauthentic people look like. But trying to move on from that, through that.
Yeah.
So what you're doing right now, it is very different. It is very unique. So if somebody is like, well, what is this stuff for? Like, how would I know if I need to work with Dr. Tiffany? What would your avatar be? What would somebody need to know about themselves to know that they needed to work with you?
Ooh, that's such a great question. They're ready to say fuck yes themselves. They're sick of the old and conforming, and they're ready to break out of whatever cage that they've built for themselves for safety. And they're ready to be courageous about saying yes to yourself, surrendering to what you really want, your own wisdom in your life, is really freaking scary. It requires a lot of surrender, and I've fought it so much. I've fought it so much, and the universe will create really painful experiences and everything will fall apart until you decide that you're just going to do things the way you want to do. I remember when I started going, I grew up really Christian, religious, and we used to actually, in the first organization, and second, really, it was very Christian like based organization too. Yeah. And we had like worship songs during our like seminars. It was so weird now looking back at it, but it was the vibe we were in right there.
Yeah.
So as I moved into more of a spiritual path and started working with like tarot cards and astrology and human design, and I felt the call to instead, I didn't want to pray before my huddles, before we saw patients. I wanted to pull a card. So I started doing that, and I had some of my staff be like, you're like going away from God and, you're an awful person. And I got really upset about it. And I was like, oh no, I'm not respecting their religion. So I stopped doing it. So I've come back to that now, but the way that I would manipulate what I would do in my own clinic because of what I thought people were going to think about me. Even talking more about, I did a somatic sexology class in the clinic. Okay. And one of my employees called it my pussy class. And fun. I got a little clitoris model that was gold that I got in the mail, and I opened it in front of my employees, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is actually what the clitoris is huge. It's not supposed to be small. This is the anatomy, right?"
Yep.
So me stepping more into those things it's taken a lot of courage, but every time that I've stepped into more of teaching people about how to connect with their bodies in different ways to create healing, it feels in alignment, has worked out, and it feels so good. So something I'm stepping into right now is how something feels is more important than the systems. So how the energy of how you even procure and put yourself out there and bring clients in and working with patients and doing your assessment, and then having more of a collaborative approach of this is what you want to get from A to B, and this is my recommendation, and then how does that feel to you? And then do you understand every single piece of it? I'm actually more on the education side of things, maybe than you. You're like, just do it. Which, I mean, people should listen to you. You're freaking amazingly smart and intelligent, and you know your shit. But I've really stepped into that. And I've also been doing something really wild. Okay. And I just started it this week with money. So
talk about it.
You're going to think I'm fucking crazy.
You have to try very hard to make me think you're crazy. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just came back from Mexico, and probably all of my employees and patients are like, "What did you do in Mexico?" I'm like, let me tell you. But anyways, I just came from Mexico visiting a friend she's renovating a retreat center, or she's calling it an immersion center.
Sure.
And she shared with me this way that she was doing this intuitive money pricing for her immersions.
Okay.
And for her services. She's also an iridologist. And when she told it to me, something really lit up inside of me. I'm like, I'm going to try that. So it's somatic intuitive pricing, where after you've gone through, okay, this is what we're going to do. Here's the plan. And we've decided to that. People then sit back, close their eyes. And so first of all, saying yes to your transformation, because we're going to be working together for 3 months at the beginning. And then we're going to decide where we go from there. But for this first 3 months of your initial immersion transformation here, are you going to say yes to your transformation? So then they say yes. And the whole time their eyes are closed, they're in their body, they're breathing. And then I ask them, I'm like, I invite you to pick a number that you would have to pay this number to be committed to your transformation. So what's that number? And they don't say it out loud. So they say it to themselves. And then I invite them to go up by 200 and check in with their body every $200 and get to the very top of where they start to feel really icky in their body. Like, I don't know if I can swing that. I don't know if I can do that. And then they tell me when they've got there. And then I tell them to land somewhere in the middle. And then they tell me the number, we write it down, and then we move on.
I mean, you're definitely the first that I've heard, with that. And I think that there's a lot to it, honestly. Because that's the key, right? Where you're constantly trying to find that balance where people take what we do seriously. And if the number is too low, they don't care. I was doing something and I'm stopping doing it, and I was taking care of kids for free as long as the parents were under care. And then when the parents are like, well, my kid's just pounding down gluten, pizza, dairy, like just everything, I'm like, why? And you're telling me that they're having behavioral issues. Like, just stop that. Like, why are you doing that? And there's no monetary value on it. So it's like, well, you're going to correct it anyways. So I'm just going to let them live their childhood the way that they are. So I think there is something to that. Now, whether or not I do that, I mean, I would love to be face to face with a lot of my clients to do that. I think that would be cool, but a lot of my calls are virtual. So like, I'd want to make sure that their eyes are closed. I would want to make sure that they're actually sitting with it. But I think that's a very unique way to do it. And I want to see how that goes.
So the first time I did it, now I've had a couple people lowball me. And actually if they lowball, I won't accept them into care because they don't value what I'm doing enough.
That's true.
So that is one way. Like, I have a minimum of if it's below this, it's not going to work out. So you do have to hold like your value as well in the same way. And it's not donation based. That's not the process. This is more intuitive, somatic based. And I'm still tweaking it, but I found they're excited when they like say, like when they come, they feel so empowered. And they're like, I'm going to do this. And I decided to pay this. Like it really takes it. It helps them step into the energy of trusting themselves, which I believe is really important for the path of healing and transformation. Like the transformation begins at you saying yes to yourself, but also everything after that has to be in alignment with that transformation. So I'm curious to see how it goes. I'll check back with you and tell you next time we talk. Maybe you'll be on our podcast and we'll let you know how it goes. But
Perfect.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And yeah, there truly is so much power in the empowerment piece of it. And the old school way of thinking is, how can I remove all of your power from you so that you have to rely on me? Yeah. Not just in the time that you're with me, but forever. And I remember I had a personal trainer back in high school, super good dude. But he was like, I want to teach you enough to make you successful, but not enough to teach you to do exactly what I do. Like, you will never know exactly what I do. And it was, he had a very bad issue with money. Like, he's just a really bad poverty mindset. But like, I understood. I'm like, oh, all right. So you're withholding some of that information, but I'm paying for you for personal training so that I would technically have to always come back to you. But then I just got too smart for him and learned everything myself.
It challenged you enough. You're like, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah. Like, I mean, shoot, I've been challenged my whole life. And that's, again, it builds a story, it builds that experience with stuff. So it's really awesome to see kind of where you've gone. And I know that your passion is shifting directly into a lot of that work too. And when I'm kind of curious, I'm very curious. When you did the pussy class, what all were you doing for that? Was that just more like teaching the anatomy? Did you do breath work in that? How did you go about that?
Oh, great question. So it was really just an introduction because I had never done anything like that before. So it was an introduction to the anatomy, your cycles. It was for women only. So just to create some safety the first time I did anything like that. So we talked about the anatomy, how your hormones work. So I taught about hormones, how hormones are affected by stress. And then also, how large your clitoris really is, how you were created for pleasure. So it was more informational and getting people in that vibe and energy of women are created to be sexual. Women are created to enjoy pleasure and have lots of pleasure in their body. And their nervous system has to do with that. And so I always love coming at it also back to the nervous system. Last night, I actually hosted an anger class where we did an anger ritual practice. And to the degree, something I was talking about there is to the degree that you can go deep into those really seemingly negative or icky emotions, anger, grief, sadness, to the depth that you can go into those in your nervous system. The same as the opposite is true with pleasure and joy and happiness. And that's what I've experienced specifically with anger too. And its connection with pleasure is that I remember when I started doing pleasure, I did this whole somatic sexology training this whole year. And it was a pretty intensive training, and anger started coming up with the somatic work and working on my body. A lot of anger started coming up. And I realized I had cut off my primal part of me, the animal body, because we have a pain body, we have a spiritual body, we have an animal body as well. And I cut off that animal body because I was too powerful for people. I was so afraid that I was going to make them feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so I started doing regular anger practices. When anger would start to come up, so anger started to come up, not just the sadness, because I was the person who was just always sad or frustrated, then I would cry. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I never thought I was an angry person. Sure. So anger would come up. I did a whole practice, and later that day was able to access so much more pleasure with my partner than I had ever experienced. And I was like, wow, there's something to this. So going deep into the depths of all the icky stuff, you can expand. It's not just about, happiness and pleasure and all the things. You have to go, and some people would call that shadow work. Yeah. I don't know about shadow. I guess you could call it shadow work, but I feel like shadow work has a lot of negativity. It does, it's just like deep work,
mm-hmm. The deep inner work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I call it the deep suck, not to sound inappropriate, but
embrace the suck.
Embrace the suck. Yeah. I mean, I actually had a call with a patient. She's her whole family is like one of my favorite patients, and it's like all of them are freaking awesome. But they lost a patient we were working with. She was doing amazing. She had a liver disorder, which basically like her liver just basically didn't work. It was an alpha trypsin like issue, and she was doing phenomenal in her care. And then I'm laughing now because like, my patients go in like the weirdest ways, which I know it's like a divine time for them. They kind of serve their purpose, whatever that may have been. But she got a staph infection from a jacuzzi. And yeah, so like I also hesitate now to go in jacuzzis, but she was treated with a medication that she was not supposed to be given. And it's incredibly hard on the liver. And it specifically says like, do not give this to the patient. And the patient died soon after. And so her whole family, they thought that they had processed through it, and I work with them all, and a lot of them superficially processed and never had a chance to cry, get angry, go through like the phases to get to that acceptance phase. And so this patient met with me this week, and she was like, every fall, I get depressed, I have suicidal thoughts, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this, I've got that. And I'm like, ooh. And what's important that I extracted from that is that hurt left an impression. And every single year, it's giving you another opportunity to move through that and fully go through the grieving process to feel the suck of it all, because it does suck. Like I miss that girl. Like she was fucking awesome. Like again, she is 100% missed. But if we allow these things to continue to happen, we just keep burying deeper and deeper. And I've been doing a lot of work with Joe Dispenza, learning a little bit more about like our pattern cycles, where we could have something, whether it was this lifetime when we were a kid. And like for me, I'm claustrophobic. And I'm like, well, why am I claustrophobic? Well, I was trapped in a pull-out cot when I was like 10 years old and almost suffocate to death. Like that's why. So I still try to go through and put myself into situations where I can process through it. But if we don't recognize those emotions, then those emotions from the past will rob us of a joy and abundance in the future. And we have all these stop signs that we don't know how the hell they came there because we've just processed through it. We just ignored it because we're too busy. We don't have time to sit. We don't, quote unquote, we don't have time to sit. We don't have time for ourselves. Like just take 10 minutes, lock your door, lock yourself in the bathroom after the kids go to sleep. Just 10 minutes, find your breath. Do you even know how to control your breath? Do you know the power of your breath? Most people don't. So again, with what you're doing and helping people to process through it, and then, from relationship standpoints, I mean, I've sent people to, there's a company called Sex Love Co. down in Austin that is, I mean, they're great, and they didn't help. What they did, Megan and I were going through some stuff. We were just trying to optimize our relationship, and we're like, let's go with these guys. And again, just like bringing some spice back into it, but you have to understand, like, you've got to put in the work. There's past traumas that you have to work through. If you've got anger that's not addressed, then that's going to spill over into your relationship. If you have past hurt from previous relationships that you're carrying over to this relationship is going to rob you of joy. So to be able to process through it is incredibly invaluable.
Well, and I believe that absolutely, I believe that that's the purpose of a partnership and a relationship, a deep relationship, like a marriage or a partnership, where that person is supposed to trigger those things. And you're supposed to be able to have a safe space to move through your old traumas, the things that have come up. I think that also people get trapped into, and I thought I did for a while, where I thought that I had to be perfect or I had to be healed before I had a healthy relationship. Yeah. But often a lot of things won't even come up until you're in the depth of that relationship. Yep. But it's about, how do you fight? You're going to fight, but how do you fight? You're going to have things come up. The person's going to disappoint you. They're going to hurt you. How do you move through that? And getting into the body and being able to safely express. I'm feeling really frustrated about this right now. So once I started really stepping into anger, when we fight, I can step out of the anger and look at it and work with it instead of having it just explode because I've stuffed so many other things down. And that's the way it's really helped. We fight really well.
I love that. You fight really well. And and oh my gosh, like the amount of chick flick movies that Megan and I have watched, it's embarrassing for me, but I need to tap down my masculine a little bit. And that's how I kind of do it, the feminine. But there's so many cliche things where it's like your relationship is coming to an end when you no longer fight anymore. Like if you're not willing to fight for your relationship, then things can kind of subside and you're like, well, it's not worth it to me. I'm miserable as is. It's not worth fighting. And you just start again, kind of just turning down your light. I'm just going to say sorry. I'm just going to say yes to everything that she wants or everything that he wants. And then the quality of your relationship goes down and then you don't understand why. And you're like, well, we don't have the spark that we used to. Well, no shit. You literally turned your lights down. So turn them back up again, fight about whatever pissed you off, move through it, successfully move through it, and you'll be better for it. And I think there's a lot of power to that.
Absolutely. There's also, I think if you turn your light down for so long, when your light gets turned on somewhere else, that's where it opens up into like infidelity or just let's just say your light turns on because of a hobby. And that's where hobbies start to really take the place of a healthy relationship and time and quality time with your partner.
And you know where I see that a lot? You probably do too.
Where?
Entrepreneurs. The business becomes the mistress every single time. Every time. And again, I've seen like super high level people. And I know that one of them, like he worked his face off for his business and he just freaking catapulted. And I'm like, to me with kids now, I'm like, how the hell did you do that? And he goes, oh bro, like I didn't want to be in my marriage. So I was doing everything I could for the business to ignore being unhappy at home. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, shit. Like I like in a way, like, bro, I worshiped you in this, like not like a god, but like I admired all that you were able to do, but now it makes sense. And if I wasn't so happy with my family, I guess I could find extra time to dive it into work, but I pride myself on the 16-hour work week. That's all I want to do. And Fridays are my fun days where I get to do podcasts with people like you. And it's just a joyous time. I really love what we've been able to kind of cultivate.
Can you tell me more about the 16-hour work week and how I want to hear about this.
All right. So this came from an argument. So a successful one. So when we had Hoyt, we were part of that organization, everything. And the guilt of trying to take time off was ever present, right? It was omnipresent. Like we shouldn't have even had a kid. How dare we? And so I was there for Megan when she had the baby and next day went back to work and didn't skip a beat and just gone. And then we got pregnant with Sage, our daughter, and we were out of that organization. We're like, we're going to do things different. We're going to do it on our terms. We're going to enjoy this thing. So as time was kind of going on while she was pregnant, I'm like, I'm like, you kind of need me at home because our son is a lot. You need help prepping with dinner. So I'm like, maybe I'm just going to stop my hours at like 5 o'clock. I was working till like 6 or so. So not that big of a difference, but I'm like 5 o'clock, I'm going to cut it off. And then I started shifting more into what I do now. And I'm like, well, maybe if I just do 4 days a week, cancel Fridays out and I'll be home for a 3-day weekend. I'll help you through whatever you need, clean the house, do whatever I need to on my end to try to help this be stress-free and successful. And then I was like, okay, baby came. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to take some time off for that. I asked permission for her. I'm like, how much time do you want me to be here? And I can do whatever it is that you want. We agreed on whatever the time was. And then as a dad, I love being a dad. And I'm like, I wonder what would happen if I just freaking hacked my hours. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, what if I just worked till like 1? And she's like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, 4 days a week to 1 o'clock. I was like, worst thing that can happen is numbers go down, profits don't go up, and I just expand my hours again. But I'm kind of curious about that. And she's like, do it. So we did it, and our numbers went up. We were able to serve from 9 to 1 and 4 days a week. And it basically turned into like the 16-hour work week. And that's just where it's been. And so I have very strict boundaries. Like, we're launching a coaching program. I'm going to be like doing business coaching with other people. And those hours will fit in the times that I choose, because I want to be fully present. I don't want to be the freaking entrepreneur that's just constantly on their phone. Like, yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, this thing that I have in front of my face right now is way more important than you, and I'll get to you when I have time. It's not the type of dad that I wanted to be. So that's kind of the short and sweet of how it turned into a 16-hour work week.
Oh, I love how kids change everything. They're amazing. Yeah. They're just our best teachers.
Yeah.
So did you have a brick and mortar, or were you more online right now? Like when that happened, when you had the 16-hour work week?
So the 16-hour work week, we were in transition. So it was December of 2 years ago? 2 years ago.
2020.
So 2020. Yeah. So going through like the COVID or whatever, we still had the brick and mortar practice. Initially we were doing like Monday and Wednesday were adjusting days. And then Tuesday, Thursdays were what I do nowadays, functional medicine, naturopathic stuff. And then from there, I was like, what if I just did 4 days of the functional medicine? Because I have a lot of joy in that, and I can start referring people to chiropractor. So I chopped the hours down, switched it all to what I do now. And then when I switched it all to what I do now, it went into telehealth. So all of my patients, I stopped coming into the office. I still had a physical brick and mortar location because it was kind of like an experiment at the time. Mm-hmm. And patients loved it. They're like, sweet, I don't have to leave. I don't have to come into your office. Like, I save money on gas. Like, this is all good. I'm like, cool. So you guys like this? They're like, we love it. I'm like, okay. So then I carried that over when we moved to Arizona. I haven't had an in-person consult besides like a Zoom, if you call that in person, but I haven't had anybody show up at my house for an in-person since we moved here. So it's all just virtual. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love hearing those stories. I actually had a little bit of that. I dropped down to an 18-hour work week after I had Bristol. So, I took 5 weeks off for maternity leave, but then came back. I only worked 1 shift a day. So I just worked, I think it was 5 days a week for like 4 hours at a time, but only one shift a day. And my numbers went up. It was wild. Like I made more money resting when I was pregnant than I had in years before. So that was it was that style of the feminine type of energy, the more that type of business, rest and balance, it was starting to creep in. Mm-hmm. But of course I fought it, and I was like, oh, this person told me I have to do it this way. And I'm so scared and so much fear. So a lot of surrender this last year has been a lot of surrender. And still going.
Yeah. Well, I think, the human journey, the human experience is all about continual surrender. It's not just, hey, I surrendered for a year and I'm done. It's like, no, we're going to be presented with new things we're going to have to surrender to, because I believe our ultimate goal is to reach pure consciousness, which to me, I feel like it's either incredibly difficult or impossible to do until we eventually make it to the other side. And that's when we hit that pure consciousness. But the goal is every single day, every single week, month, year, we want to try to get closer and closer and closer to that pure consciousness. And that's one of the reasons why I love like the functional side of things, where I work with a lot of I just call them spiritual gurus, like these spiritual healing coaches that do some of the stuff that you do. But when we eliminate the physical, we enhance the spiritual. And I had somebody who was just randomly like, hey, I think I want to get into this. And then like halfway through just doing a yeast removal protocol with her. And she's like, I'm seeing some crazy shit now. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I'm having these clear downloads. I'm having like career path choices. I'm meditating. All this stuff is coming to me. And like, she's like, I did all this stuff before, but now it's like just flooding. I'm like, well,
I love it.
Yeah. When you don't have the physical ailments and the physical distractions, you're able to be purely present. You know, if you're sitting there and you're trying to meditate and your gut is feeling like you got gut rot and you have to go to the bathroom, or your back is killing you because you got arthritis because you have an inflammatory diet, you're constantly distracted. And the conspiracy theory in me is like, well, of course, Americans designed to tap down our potential. So how can we make them as sick as possible, make it so difficult for them to really experience this pure consciousness? That's my own little.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you know, as you probably, and I know you teach this, is the neurotransmitters that support the brain from the gut, right? Dopamine, serotonin, like so much of that is made in the gut. And so and also with, I always tell people when I tell them we're going to test them, like do a microbiology test for yeast, they're like, well, I don't have yeast infections. I'm like, well, do you crave sugar? Like, you probably have some yeast going on. It's about 70% of people I test, I'm going to find some yeast in there.
Yeah. Or just the quick test. Stick out your tongue for me real quick. Oh, it's white. Right? Where did that come from?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And yeast is one of those ones where, I mean, there's a lot of yeast that does pop up, but there's a lot of it that people just mistreat all the dang time, like all the time. And it's sad to see that. But it's just one of those things where you want to make sure you get properly tested, have somebody that knows what the hell they're doing. Otherwise, it's just going to be like a holistic allopathic approach where it's just to take this for this and take this for this. And then they never do the true repair work as to why that happened to begin with. And if somebody's trying to treat you for yeast and doesn't tell you that you need to change your diet, they don't know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult to get rid of that. But then also, how did your nervous system and your immune system allow that parasite, really fungus parasite, to take hold? And what has been suppressing or distracting your immune system? Well, emotions absolutely play into that. So like low back pain, anger, stomach and intestines, fear. So we're talking about the gut. Where are the fears in your life? What are you afraid of? Something that I had with breathing difficulties is typically associated with anxiety. So thinking about anxiety as fear of the future. So breathing in is breathing in what's coming at you. And so when you have anxiety, you have fear of even breathing in what is coming at you in life. And imagine like living that way. And that's how that physically manifests. I've seen so many people's light bulbs go off when I've explained that. And it's been really powerful because anxiety has exploded. I've seen it explode in people.
Yeah, well, especially, I mean, with COVID, and then you have to face hating a job, hating your relationships, these toxic relationships are being exposed. I feel like the last 2 years have just been like generational awakening, where people are starting to become awake to all of the stuff that's been going on to them. And they're like, I no longer accept that as truth. And now it's time to do the work. And I mean, you talk about the stress response too. And just from like the physiological aspect, taking the spiritual out of it for a second, you raise your cortisol over time. What that's going to do is going to cause insulin resistance. So what's that going to do is going to make it very difficult for you to handle your blood sugar. You're not going to be able to process it properly. You're going to still crave those foods, because nobody ever craves healthy food when they're stressed. They crave the ice cream. They crave the comfort foods because they're dealing with trauma that they haven't addressed. And then all of a sudden you're like, I can't stop eating ice cream. I can't possibly stop eating pizza.
Oh, so like, emotional. Such an attachment. You can.
Yeah. It's just, there's something else. There's a reason behind it. You could probably go back to a trauma that happened when you were 10 and it was a comfort food where, like, I don't know, I'm going to go crazy, but like your dad beat you. And then afterwards he tried to make it all better by giving you a pizza. And you didn't even realize that. And you're like, oh crap. So now pizza has a different connotation to it. We're like, I don't really think I want to have pizza. If I do, I want it to be my choice and not to, suppress something that happened back when I was a child.
Yeah. And also the neurotransmitter dopamine release when you have sugar, and those are addictive substances as well. So one thing that I've really been stepping into, especially speaking of dopamine, is saying yes to what pain are you going to say yes to in life? And in Enneagram, I don't know if you get into, and I know your wife is into Enneagram as well, but in the Enneagram, I'm a 7. I know she told me she was a 7 as well. And our core strategy that we've created as 7s is to avoid pain. And there's actually this really cool, have you seen the videos for After School, SKOOL?
No.
Oh, there's such a good one on dopamine. I would really recommend. It's so awesome. So if you're listening, watch that. It's amazing. So it talks about how experiencing certain types of painful things actually helps support the dopamine receptors in your brain, in your body. And so you can experience that. Is that actually like flipping the script on how you think about dopamine? I thought it was really a fascinating video about that. But I've really been diving into, okay, what pain, am I going to do a cold shower, cold plunge, right? Or am I going to go do that hot yoga that's really uncomfortable? Or am I going to now be distracted and tired? And then that is the pain that your body is going to experience some kind of pain. And I get to choose my pain now.
Yeah. And I think there's resiliency in that.
Yeah.
Because it builds that inner strength. And somebody posted, one of my friends posted something about what does she do in the sauna? And she was like, nothing. I just sit there. Because when people experience pain, they have a quick response to it. What can I do? What can I take? What can I distract myself with to not feel this pain? Right? So you're in a sauna, it's hot as hell. You bring your cell phone in and it's going to melt, or like it's going to say temperature's too hot, but you still choose to bring your cell phone in there. And when your phone goes off like that, I see people leave the sauna all the time.
Really?
But they don't. Oh yeah. And so it's like, sit with that, sit with the suck, sit with the pain, process through it, and see and feel how amazing your body feels after you tackled what seemed like just a little mini obstacle. And I'll go into an example. For me, I went to Alaska last week, to Kodiak, and I am afraid of heights. And people, the Kodakians, they don't screw around when it comes to their mountains. They're like, hey, there's the peak. We're just going to fucking go there. I don't care what boulders, what rocks, how steep it is. We're just going to go because I want to see what's up there. Like, that's just a mentality. So he was like, oh, we're going to hike the North Sister Mountain. It's going to be a really easy hike. He looked at it on Trails, the trail app or whatever, all trails. And he goes, this takes people 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 50 minutes max. So we'll probably do it in like, just under 2 because we're in great shape. I'm like, okay, let's see what we got here. But it was just like straight up and going through. And then all of a sudden, because of the suck that I was experiencing, my weaknesses started showing. And my weakness, and I'll share it, is the how-tos. I'm such a logical thinker that I'm like, well, how am I going to get there? And I started verbalizing it. Instead of it just being in my head, because I was oxygen deprived, basically I just am vomiting out all of my insecurities. I'm like, well, how do I get there? There's no way we're getting up to the top. No, we're not going there. How are we going to do this? And that's over there. And then you start coming up with all these crazy things. And if I was distracted with a phone, or if I was just like, I don't know, doing something where I'm just trying to distract myself from it, I wouldn't have found that inner weakness. And I promised myself after that, because I reached close to the peak on the Three Sisters. It was just, I don't know what 30 knots is in a mile an hour, but it was really fast.
Oh,
like
wow.
The winds were blowing me over. Like if I stood upright, and I'm a heavier guy, I'm 210 pounds, like the wind wanted to knock me off the mountain. And there was this really narrow, like rock gap that you had to get to. That was like 10 feet of rock to get to the top. And I'm like, I'm just not going to do that. And then the next hike that we did was a pyramid mountain, which was like one of the second tallest in Kodiak. I think it was the second tallest. Made it all the way up to the top. And it was just because I wasn't worrying about the how-to. It's just put one foot in front of the other and you'll get there. And I think when it comes to what you do and what we do jointly, that sometimes people can talk themselves out of it because they don't know. And the surrender is where the growth truly happens. And that's where you're coachable. That's where you're willing to learn, because you're not distracted by the suck. You're motivated by the suck to step into a stronger version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's inner growth for sure. Right there. Like doing the work.
And then it's perspective after that, right? And I brought that back with me. Those mountains were freaking huge. I have mountains outside of my house, and I used to think those were gigantic. I'm like, I could hike that no problem. Like, this would be so easy. So then all other challenges in life, right? If you go through your health journey, all other things just seem like they're just small little pebbles that you might step on. You're like, and then you just move on from it, versus you step on a pebble and you're like, I'm a victim. I'm down for the count. I'm just going to go into that identity of being damaged.
I've felt that. I've absolutely felt that the things that I used to freak out early in business And then the things that I freak out about now are so different. Mm-hmm. But then also one thing that's really helped me heal almost that past version of myself is it's similar to like parts work or that you've probably heard of before. Somebody, if you're listening, you've heard of, but going back and thanking that younger version of myself and telling her that she did a really good job and giving her so much gratitude. Well, I believe that time really isn't real. So everything is happening all the time. And so this is going to sound really weird, but if I'm going back and giving gratitude for my younger self, then my younger self, because it's happening all the time, is actually going to feel that energy and can tap into that energy of gratitude. So I almost then flip it and I think of my future self giving gratitude to myself right now. Mm-hmm. So when I'm going through a really painful, sucky situation, that my future self is thanking me and just like soaking in the gratitude that I'm feeling from my future self too. So it's this game I kind of play with myself, mm-hmm. but I think it's real.
No, I mean, the science is, a lot of times it is behind that. There was a study that they did where I think it was in 1991, they had a whole bunch of people pray for cancer patients or something. I don't remember the exact details. Dispenza talks about it in his book, but basically they prayed for these people and they didn't know who they were, but they put the energy and the emotion and the intention behind it with the proper prayer. And then they somehow, I have to go back and look at it, but somehow the prayer actually was for people that had cancer 10 years prior. And they looked at the people who had like the best outcomes and the best results. And it was the people that were prayed for.
Oh, wow.
So like it transcended time. Yeah. It transcended time. So, and that's what, when you're talking about that, I'm like, that doesn't sound weird. Maybe to some of the listeners, it might sound weird, but when you learn about the quantum realm and we have multiple universes basically going through at the same time, to me, if we have a thought, then in some other timeline that's running tangent to what we're in and experiencing right now, that reality actually exists. And it's up to us. Do we want to splice in that reality to add that into our timeline, or do we not? And I know the Avengers kind of ruined it. They kind of played with it a little bit, but really, like, that's the quantum realm. That's what they're talking about, the multiple universes that are taking place currently that we aren't even aware of. And so there are many versions of us. As to whether or not we want to tap into it, that's up to us. Be uncomfortable, do weird stuff, because you'll get weird results and you'll love it.
Yeah, I think I had a dream the other night that I hadn't changed. Okay. I stayed in that old system, that like first group, stayed in that old system. I still have friends that are still in it.
Yeah.
And how my life looked now was so different. If I had stayed in that old system, it was really kind of freaky and really weird, but we can always choose to stay where we're at, and we can always just keep going with the safety of what we know and what's comfortable, or we can do something different and looking at something different. So I appreciate that you're on that path too. I appreciate that you're having this podcast and that you're getting the word out there, and that, I mean, you can choose to do something different, and it's scary, but there are lots of people that are going on that path, so you're not alone.
Yeah, you have to just see it. And somebody gave me an analogy or an example where it was like, you might feel like you're on an island when you're doing this work yourself, but when you ascend and you go above, you'll see more people, you'll see more lights shining, and you'll be able to be paired up with that, because again, we are all energy. So we're going to attract those who are similar minded. And that's why they say misery loves company. So does abundance. A lot of abundant people like to hang out with abundant people because they have similar mindsets.
Yeah.
So if people were to choose you, because I have to be respectful of your time here, even though I'd love to talk to you all day long, and I'll probably still text you after this. Awesome. But if people want to choose to work with you and experience what you have to offer, where can people find you, and what do you have to offer for them?
Such a great question. So if you want to hear more just about my life, my path, we do have a podcast called Telling Secrets Podcast with me and my partner, Jason. And so we go into a lot of fun things. The most recent one that he recorded and put out was he's starting to do now Bible readings. He used to be a pastor. Okay. He used to be a pastor for 10 years and did a whole deconstruction. And now he's almost like reconstructing expecting it, but in a very different way.
That's
and
awesome.
so it's been so amazing seeing his path and all of that. So we talk a lot about relationships, just life, different concepts. So that's a way that you can just enjoy and listen and follow along. If you want to work with me directly, I will work over Zoom. So if you're not, I'm in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So if you're in Colorado, we can work in person. If you're not, we can work over Zoom. So the name of my clinic is Springs Integrated Health. And you can call the clinic. You can even text that number of the clinic. And also you can make an appointment online to meet with me. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on here. And I wasn't joking. I'm probably going to be messaging you because you brought up a whole bunch of different things that I want to know more about. But
nice.
The other thing that I would like for you to try to do as well is when you do those workshops, try to make it virtual. Have a virtual link to that
out. Yeah.
Because then I can help to promote it and have some of my patients kind of tune into that as well. If you want to charge for it or whatever, it doesn't matter. But that way we can start building more of that for my community too. So that way we can all work together.
Yeah, I love that idea. I'm still like working out the kinks of how do we make these things virtual, and then still the people who are virtual, how do we make their experience? I want to be really honest about my capacity of how do I want to make sure their experience is full and valuable. And then it's not taking away from the people we're in person with, but we'll figure it out. We'll make it happen. I am going to start doing anger circles virtually though.
Okay.
So anger circles virtually. So you can watch out for that on my Instagram. I'm also at Dr. Dr. Tiff Graham is my Instagram handle right now. So,
okay. We'll put that in the show notes and stuff as well. So that way everybody can follow you. Definitely subscribe to our podcast. That way you can see some of the awesome episodes or listen to some of the awesome episodes. But thank you. Stumbling over my words to end this, but thank you so much, Doc, for being on with me today. It's been my pleasure for sure. And we'll probably have to have you on again too, to dive into some other awesome topics, because why the hell not?
Why the hell not? It's your podcast. You get to be the boss.
That's true. That's true. Well, have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.
So much gratitude. Thank you so much.
You bet.